In this week's episode, we are going to have a conversation, have a look at the research studies and pull apart basically the different perspectives of stay-at-home mum versus working mum. And do we really have a choice? Where's it all coming from? Why is the pot being stirred? And how women have been pitted against women rather than actually embracing women. So we will unpack that without further ado. Let's get into it. Hello everyone, you're listening to All Cards on the Table podcast with Claire and Sylvia, a show that talks about how men and women aren't so different from each other. We just don't speak the same language. We will dissect every topic and put an end to miscommunication. So, get ready to get uncomfortable. Hi and welcome back. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Claire Attio.
Hey everyone, this is Sylvia Yahaira.
And this week, Sylvia, we're going to be looking at the whole stay at home, not stay at home. Do women really have a choice? Have we all been programmed? Are the choices that we're making even our choices, or are they sublingual programming that we've received since the time we were born? I mean, it just goes on and on and on, doesn't it?
This all started because I came across this post when we're looking for content of what's happening, where a stay-at-home mom secretly kind of records herself, and you can hear in the background the husband saying, I've been carrying you for like a few years and I've been paying for everything while you've been at home taking care of the kids. And of course everyone was like, are you kidding me? You can only imagine the comments that were coming, but for me I was like, is he serious? Like, does he just think that we just stay at home and do nothing? And we've all seen those ads where like, okay, I want you to work and I want you to clean the house and I want you to do this and I want you to do that and this and that and blah blah blah. And you have this fake interview that people go and interview for a job that was posted in monsters.com or something like monstersjob.com, and they all show up for this interview where they give a list of everything that stay-at-home moms do, and at the end of the day it's like, oh, by the way, you're not getting paid, it's a free internship. And they're like, oh no, nobody wanted it, right? But they just listed everything that stay-at-home moms do,
yeah,
but nobody wanted it. And then it's value, and stay-at-home moms are constantly undervalued. And when I saw that post, I was just like, I can't believe at this point in 2023, when we know all this knowledge, it's still going on, that people still think like that.
Well, I think women, I'm gonna say it, I think women are the worst for being, and I've said this before in other podcasts about other subjects as well, women, we have been taught to be critical of each other because it keeps us apart. When women get together, we're a force to be reckoned with. Because we've got we have bringing all the aspects. We bring in the nurturing, we bring in that fairness, we bring in the intellect, we bring in the firmness. When you've got women together, and it's the same with men. When you get to men, you've only got to look at men in the forces and what they can actually achieve when they're working together. So it's that separation. So, but women are very critical of women. If you want to stay at home, I've seen it, and I think women are very critical of themselves if they want to stay at home as well, because they know that they want to stay at home, they know that they want to be that nurturing mother, they want to provide that security and those family dynamics that they had and cherish, and they want to recreate that for their family. And yet they feel guilty. They feel guilty. Oh, I should be having a career. Oh, I should be doing this. Oh, I should be doing that. So a lot of the time we can be our own worst enemies because we feel we're not good enough because we've chosen something that's deemed old-fashioned.
Yeah, or because we've been told that we're not good enough, or that we don't provide anything that they think childcare is easy and anyone can do it, which we all know that it's not true.
Yeah.
But it's also the fact that we feel guilty because we're constantly being told by society and everyone around us. So what are you doing? When are you going to go back to work? Are you going to go back to work? Or even from your own spouse, like in this case, rubbing in your face, like, when are you going to go to work? What are you doing? Like, how are you going to get money? So when you don't have that support system, of course, we're going to feel guilty for doing that.
Mhm.
For me growing up, it was kind of like a no-brainer. It was going to be, I'm going to stay, once I decide to have children, I'm going to stay home, and my partner needs to understand that that's going to happen, and that they need to be able to provide for me to stay home without making me feel guilty for doing that.
Mhm.
That didn't happen, of course, because I mean, the idea was there, but I didn't marry somebody within my culture who understood that. So we had a lot of bumps, between us,
Mhm.
even though I had explained it over and over before we had children, that this was something I needed to do because it was what I wanted. It's to be able to spend time with the children. And of course, a lot of women came at me saying, like, well, that's really unfair, isn't it? Because, they're going to be, he's going to be working double time. He's never going to be home, and he's going to have to provide all this. So it wasn't like the man.
But you did, and I'm going to stop you there because I've heard that, and you're not the only one that has come up against that argument. Oh, you're being unfair. Oh, he's having to work 24/7 to provide everything.
Yeah.
If you're in a relationship and you've actually, I mean, fine, you didn't coerce him into marriage. You
Mm-hmm.
didn't get yourself pregnant without any discussions and then go,
Mm-hmm.
oh, actually, now I'm going to sit on my ass and stay at home and do nothing. Because
Right.
that's not, but this is what people think, and this is not the reality. You told your husband before you even got married, if we have a family, I want to be a stay-at-home mum.
Yes.
He knew that if he wanted to continue and pursue this relationship, there was a role that was expected of him.
Mm-hmm.
And vice versa, he would have told you things that he expected from a marriage before you even went down that road. I mean, you don't have to go into it because it's personal, but it would have been there.
Yes, exactly.
Those are the dynamics that we have. We have these conversations. And if you're not having your conversations, you're not having these conversations. These are the first bloody red flags. You're not leading somebody. And I've had it in my own family as well, where I have
Mm-hmm.
to say certain members of the family have kind of looked at other members of the family's relationship. Oh, he lives a dog's life. He lives a dog's life. He has to do this and he has to do that.
Mm-hmm.
He has to do the other. Well, actually, no. They obviously had a conversation. I'm not privy to it. That was a conversation between them and their relationship, and I don't even need to be privy to it. They're happy. They have been
Yeah.
married for X amount of years. Do they have lumps and bumps in the road? Of course they do. That's normal. But they have made their choices, and it's the rest of the family's responsibility to support those choices, whether we agree with them or not. It's got absolute sweet FA to do with us. It's
Mm-hmm.
their relationship. And so they've made their choices, they've made their pathway, and so we support them in that.
Mm-hmm.
Not sit there criticizing the choices they've made. And I think this is one of the big problems within family and within societies. We look into other people's life and start criticizing, and then everybody
Right,
gets on the
exactly.
defensive.
Well, and that's really to the point, because it's actually sometimes not even, like, for instance, my husband and I, or somebody else family, like, a couple that have a problem with it, is the time that starts becoming a problem is when like third people in society start interfering. And then they start having those questions. Well, hey, why aren't you doing that? Well, my sister works and comes home and does this or XYZ, or my husband or my brother goes to work and helps out with the children. Why aren't you doing that? And so we started looking at society who start pinpointed against us, and it gets to the point where we have now alienated ourselves in this, like, you're going to be a stay-at-home mom, and you have, oh, you're not doing anything, you're just staying at home not doing nothing while your husband goes to work and is never home and stuff like that. Or how you choose to go to work, and you're like, oh my goodness, the children are by themselves, who's going to care for them, who's taking, what happens when you're sick? And it's like, you're, as a woman, you can never win.
Well, you're in a
It's
rock and a hard place, aren't you? Because if you're a stay-at-home mum, you're like that guy actually said. I mean, that's disgusting within their own
yeah,
relationship because they
exactly.
obviously, but you're swinging on their shirt tails, or you go to work, and then all psychological statistics are showing that children that had both parents working grow up suffering
Hmm.
with more anxiety and depression.
Yes.
So what choice do you make?
Hmm.
You stay at home and you get lambasted as a freeloader, or you go to work and you bring up dysfunctional children and dysfunctional adults into the world.
Hmm. Yes, exactly. And so when I made that decision of staying at home, it was for two reasons. One, well, of course, I wanted to spend the first 5 years of with my children when the babies. I didn't want them to go to daycare until they were able to talk and tell me if something happened. Like most women, we want to make sure that they're able to tell us if something happened or hurt them. But also for the fact that I wanted to build a strong foundation for them, because when I was reading a lot into about this, it was the fact that yes, children that go early into daycare tend to have higher separation anxiety as adults, and they tend to not do as well in school as also. So if they actually did those studies of parents, a stay-at-home mom versus parents whose kids go to work, parents go to work, the kids that stay-at-home mom did better in school and they were more confident. And even they went as far as when they are homeschooled, which is a thing in the US, it's not a thing here in Sweden.
It's
Um,
starting in the UK, to be honest.
yeah,
People are sick of the education system and
they
the indoctrination that's going on. Yeah.
yeah, they're some of the most very well-rounded, secure individuals.
Yeah.
And they score higher in grades, it's higher intellectual and emotionally as well.
Mm-hmm.
So with all that information, I said, you know what? I know that for me going, my mom stayed with us for the first couple of years with us. And then when we were in grade school, she was like, okay, it's time for me to go to work. Then I felt like, okay, you know what? I got a good time with my mom. I had a great time, but now she also has to work. And I noticed that my brother and I were much more secure as well. But my youngest brother, who was left in care as a baby, grew up to have anxiety problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually talking to my youngest brother, like, hey, so is it because of this? You're thinking that? And he's actually a psychologist as well. And so we're just talking back and forth. We constantly, compare notes and everything. And so we were like, that's interesting that I'm reading this. So I sent him this report that I'm reading. And so we're looking into the anxiety of babies. I'm not saying that that's true for everything, because these are just scientific data. Doesn't mean
Yeah.
it's good or proven or anything. And it's just, this is what just is showing
Yeah.
something for us to learn. So don't feel like if you're going to work that's going to happen to you, because there's other things that you can do as well. There's so many factors that go into that. So don't feel guilty for that. But that is one of the main issues
Yeah.
with children who are left too young. Um,
And
even
I
if
think I'm going to introduce, because you hit upon a very good point that we need to get across here, because Sylvia's talking about stay at home because that's what she wanted to do. I wanted to be a stay at home mum. Unfortunately, my circumstances were very different, and that I wasn't economically able. Well, to be honest, it would have been economic and professional suicide for me to be a stay at home
mhm,
mum at the time where I was at my career, and so that wasn't an option for me. And my daughter still doing good at school. She's still a well-rounded kid.
mhm, mhm,
It depends on the input as well, that a lot of it factors in is to, I mean, it factors in personality types, the type of childcare that you're actually providing for them, the amount of time that you're able to spend with them when you are home. Is that quality time? Are they involved? Is there family time? There's, as Miss Sylvia said, there's many factors. So if your economic or your professional circumstances are that you cannot be a stay-at-home mom, then
Yes.
don't feel guilty about that. Please don't feel guilty
Yeah,
about
no.
that.
This is why sometimes bringing up studies of this or can be very triggering for some people because of this. But I mean, like I said, these are just facts and scientific data that was collected. It doesn't mean that it's true for everyone. This is just, it was based in like I think that the last one was in 2019, right before the pandemic. So, but what was interesting about this particular study was that after the pandemic, it actually benefited the children. And we were like, oh my God, the children are going to be away from school and education, and they're going to suffer, and what's their social life is going to be, and this and that. And now they come up with a new study now that just came out. And those kids have now come back stronger. Those kids that were able to stay at home with their parents during the pandemic are coming out very strong-willed children because they were able to be with the parents. And also the pandemic actually brought up so many amazing, not just, I mean, obviously it's bad, but it brought up families together that, of course, that weren't used to being together. They got to know who their kids were, and the kids finally had time with their parents that they've been longing. Maybe they weren't able to say and everything's happy and dandy, but that at the end it did make an impact positively for the children. So there is some truth of that whole separation anxiety. And so it does affect, or especially in the early years, in the first 5 years, it affects with anxiety, or it's separation anxiety. And then between they say that the biggest impact was specifically between the ages of 6 and 7. So
yeah.
So
and
that's something.
It's interesting, and I think we really need to take on board as well. And Sylvia and I have said this many times. Yes, we're going to be called conspiracy theories, but you need to be asking the questions: why? Why is there a drive to create these segregations and separations? Whether it's women pitting against women, women being torn from their children, fathers being torn from their children. The whole structure of society is geared up to create greater separation and greater anxiety. And we need to really start asking, why are you doing this? What is the end game? I have my theory on what the end game is. Sylvia has her theories.
Of course.
They're very similar. And
absolutely.
You need to start asking that for yourselves. I'm not going to feed you, but start asking yourselves why. When we have all these studies, when we have an existence that has of old been balanced, where you have a matriarchy and a patriarchy, and they actually know their roles, they understand their roles, they are comfortable within those roles, and it doesn't diminish them in any way because they embrace those roles. Why are we messing and saying, oh well, no, women need to be doing this and men need to be doing this and women need to be doing this and men need to be it's man, there is nothing wrong with a man changing a nappy and giving a bottle.
The
same as there is nothing wrong with a woman putting out the trash and earning the money if they have the higher paid job. There is nothing wrong with that. Both are capable of doing each other's role.
Exactly. But you know what? There's actually, in the past 2 years, there's been an increase of stay-at-home parents. And I'm not saying moms, parents. Because there's also been a higher increase of stay-at-home dads because, now we have women who are making equally or even more money than men. So it is coming to that point where it's now stay-at-home moms is no longer going to be the
It'd be
But
interesting to
it'd
see in
be
a few
stay-at-home
years if the
parents.
men feel valued.
Exactly. And so there is a benefit, and we are seeing it, especially after the pandemic, when parents starting to see a change in their children, their behaviors and everything, where they're like, hey, there's something going on here. Maybe one of us does need to stay at home, at least for the first years of their lives, where it's crucial, because you can always go back to work. And like you said, something very important earlier, where you said I had to, if for me to stay at home mom, it was economically, I couldn't do it, and it was going to be also career suicide. And that's so true, and something we don't talk about enough when women make that decision. Because when I made the decision to stay at home, I did have a complete career suicide. I had just gotten a promotion with a firm, and I had to make the decision to stay at home, or say goodbye to my career. And I was in architecture, interior architect. And so I couldn't do both, because one of the projects that we were working on was an old building where there was asbestos. So I couldn't be pregnant and be around that. And so I had to make the decision as well. And like, when I said, okay, once the baby comes, I'm staying, I'm going to work as much as I can and save up, and then I'm going to stay with the baby. Well, that had to come earlier. But then when they said, oh, this is such an easy career for you to come back to, that's truly not the case.
No.
It changes every job, goes so fast, and it's going even faster for every career. It's not the way it used to be. It's like there's so much information, and we're evolving so much in our careers, that even if you miss 5 years, that is, like you said, career suicide. You can't just go back and plug yourself.
Architecture was predominantly, if we're going back, architecture has predominantly been a masculine role. It's been a masculine profession. I know it's,
Yeah, absolutely.
I was in nursing, which is predominantly been a feminine role. And yet it would have been suicide. You take 5 years out of nursing, you've got to go back and do your training.
Yeah, exactly.
This is what they go, oh yeah, you've got these choices. And this is what I'm saying. We don't have these choices.
No.
You take 5 years off without doing any study. If you actually took 5 years completely dedicated to your children, and you didn't do any study to keep updated in that 5 years, which basically means that you are working, even if you're just studying, and you are working, because
it's absolutely,
there's only X amount of study that you can actually do at home. You have to go back and do a retraining. You don't have to finish your whole 3-4 years of degree, but you do have to go back and do a year's worth of updating training.
Exactly. So that's why I want to bring that up, because I think people are like, well, you can always just go back to work. No, it's not that simple.
No. And most careers are like this now. Most careers, because we brought CPD out, and for those, it is a continual professional development, because that it was brought out, and that was brought out 20, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, probably more. I'm showing my age now. But when that started coming out, that made it kept it meant that we could have benchmarks for the professionalism. It meant that you could make sure that you were continually updated. But it also meant that it pushed women out of roles, or it pushed the parent that decided to stay at home out of roles, because they would become outdated. They couldn't continue that, and it would be very hard to get back into it. It isn't a case of, right, okay, kids are in school, I can go back to work. No, it's not that simple.
It's not that simple. And for people that don't understand this, it's kind of like, I'm not going to be as harsh, but sometimes when I have someone tell me, and it's usually women, which is kind of like, I don't like this, like, we're doing this to each other, because we should know better how hard that is. But when they go, well, you can always just go back to work, right? And I'm like, no, like, can you go back to 5 years with your children and redo all that? No, right? So what makes you think that I can go back and learn all that and be up to date and gain those 5 years of experience? Where am I gonna get that?
Yeah.
So, and let's just say, you have one child. what happens when you have two,
Well, I was thinking that
three,
when I was
you
talking.
know?
Yeah.
And so by the time, like, I had to, because it getting to the point for me where, of course, like I mentioned earlier, my husband comes from Sweden, where it's equal and both women and men have equal rights, and they believe that each person should be able to work, and society takes care of children, and that's a whole different can of worms that I'll get into it later. But when we had this discussion, I knew very little of the culture,
Mhm.
like, and I didn't know, actually, I didn't know anything of the culture. So when I expressed to him where I come from, my culture, and everything, he was okay with everything. I introduced him, I took him to Mexico. I said, this is what we believe. If my dad sat with him and talked to him about what it means, you know, to marry a Hispanic Mexican girl,
Yeah.
you know, grew up in LA, and he understood all of it. He's met my family, he knows the culture. Even with all that information, he still decided to get married, because we didn't just get married or get pregnant. We got married. Then in Mexico, before you can even get married, you have to have talks where you go to the priest and for like months to make sure that you're the right fit for everyone. So it wasn't like, oh, we just jumped in and got married. It was like a long process. Then after that, it was 2 years before we had a child. And even with all of that information, he still sometimes goes back to his culture, because that's what he grew up with.
Yeah.
So I've noticed when he had more contact with his Swedish family, he would change, and almost like they're like, why is she not working? Why is she not doing this? You know, or, and I'm not saying that's what they said. I don't have any evidence, but I did notice there was a change in him, because his culture would pop up and be like, hey, why aren't you working? You know, you can actually do something to stay at home. You can work from home. So there was always this thing. And I'm like, yeah, but we don't actually like need to do that, because, yeah, I think we make enough good money for both, for me to stay home. And also I told him, like you said, if I work, that's going to put us in a different bracket, which means I'm just working for free. The only time he backed off from me stating that I shouldn't go to work is when I said, if I work, that's going to put us in a different tax bracket, which means you're not going to see any extra income. And the children are going to be left with strangers to be taken care of. So somebody else is going to raise your child, not me.
Yeah.
Then he will back off. Then, but it was interesting that even that still played a part of him.
Yeah.
You know,
and it's that societal pressure. And I think this is what we need to talk about, is that societal pressure, because that is what's creating massive discord within couples and within families. It's the societal expectations, the societal pressure of how we should be. And who the hell is society? Who are governments to think that they could tell us how we live? Our governments are there for us. We put them there, and they are to keep law and order. They're not there to tell us how to live our bloody lives. And this is where it's gone wrong.
That is good. And it is. And it's just, to me, it's more of a, when you have a stay-at-home mom, it is because it's a choice, and it should be your choice. And the only time you don't have a choice is because it's economically, it's just not possible, and you have to understand that. So that's, to me, it's kind of like you have to have some empathy with the women who decide to go to work because she's obviously has to. I'm sure there's no woman out that's like, you know what, I'm going to choose my job over my children.
It's not an easy choice, because women now we did have, they're trying to change that. We did have the choice as to whether we got pregnant or not.
Oh yeah, that's a whole
but you know, so the majority of women that have a family and then they find themselves in an economic situation where they have to think, right, okay, we have got to go to, let's be honest, 9 months is a long time. So when you start out and you think, right, okay, we're going to start a family, your situation could be one thing, but what's to say in that 9 months your partner didn't lose their job, or I mean, there's a million, 100 varieties of situations that could actually change. That means by the time she actually had given birth, she sat there and she had this dream of like, oh, now is the right time. They could have been waiting 5, 6, 7, 8 years for the optimum moment to think, right, now is the time we can have a family and I can stay at home and we're going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then all goes to shit.
Yeah.
And she finds herself, before she's even given birth, she's crying because she's not going to be able to provide that child with what she intended. She's not going to be able to give that child the 5 years of nurturing that she so desperately wanted, and what so many studies show are going to be beneficial for her child.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody comes along and goes, you're going to work, are you? What about your child? Don't you think that's
Yeah.
selfish?
That to me is, it's again like, okay, is that really necessary? I mean, you need to put in yourself in that person's shoes. I had a conversation with one of my really good friends. She's a lawyer, and of course, she, as you said, she had to make this decision because she studied, worked, and took her a long time to get to that position, because she's actually in an area where predominantly her firm is mostly males. So of course, when she got pregnant, she cried because she was like, I want this baby and I want to have this baby, but now I just literally proved what everyone has been saying, that a woman cannot hold a position in a career like in a man's world. So she chose to go back to work. And every day, I mean, this is years ago, the kids are teenagers now, and we still talk, and then she's like, I wish I could have just told them go to hell with all of that, but I can't take those years. But the pressure was so big from my family,
Mm-hmm.
from my friends, from society. Like you said, I felt like I didn't have a choice. Mm-hmm. And now I'm like, you shouldn't feel guilty. You did what you, at the moment, I mean, your children are fine. They're grown now. She's like, yeah, but I feel like sometimes I don't know them. And then I said, well, that's when quality time makes, that's what I'm saying. That's when it becomes, okay, you choose to go to work. Don't come home and then be at the phone, be doing other things. Spend time with your children, because it's not about quantity, it's about quality.
And also, let's be honest, you could be a stay-at-home. There will be a million stay-at-home mums there that have poured their heart and soul into their families and sacrificed their whole life, everything for their children. And their children get to teenagers and they go, I don't know who that is walked through that door. They grow up. And but I think the problem is, you're quite right. When you haven't poured everything into them, there is that little bit, because society, again, there's a lot of pressure, makes you feel guilty. And so if you think, oh, I don't really have that close a relationship with that child, you think it's your fault, rather than thinking, oh, they're a bloody teenager. They don't want to know you. They're going.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. No, she meant, I mean, when she said that the kids were little, not they're teenagers. Now she just goes, goodbye, good riddance, good. So we laugh about this because, I remember when I got pregnant, I told her, like, oh my goodness, like my plans, like, yeah, but you guys already have a plan. You guys talked about this. And then I kept, in the back of my head, I kept reminding my husband, like, do you remember we agreed on this? Why did I have to do that? Like, I should have just told him one time, like, hey, I'm pregnant, what's going to happen? We agreed on this, blah, blah, blah. But because I was so fearful that he would go back on his word, I kept reminding him and nagging him and telling him, because I kept hearing from all these other women telling me, like, oh no, he's not gonna go through that. Watch him change. Watch all these things. Oh, and then you're not gonna work. What happens if this? What happens if that happens? And I'm like, the fear that just came in. And so I went through that the first years of my life with the children, of like feeling not only lonely, because now I don't have the circle that I used to have of, women around me. My husband's gone all the time for working, and I'm sitting there going, did I make the right choice? Just like every woman who chose to go to work goes, I'm here, I'm working, and I never get to see my child. Did I make the right choice? So we're constantly doubting ourselves. We're constantly just saying, what are we doing? Because no matter what we picked, it's the wrong choice. It doesn't, because of society.
I don't think it's the wrong choice. It's not
for society.
Society makes us believe,
for society,
and makes us question ourselves. And I think this is what we've got to start stamping out, and what we've got to start recognizing is that, and that goes back to what I said: how dare society and how dare governments think that they have the right to tell us how to live our lives. They're our lives. We get to choose. They are put into position to make sure the infrastructure, law and order is in place. Full stop. Not to tell us how to live our lives, not to tell us what to eat and drink and breathe and think. This is where we've got it severely wrong, because we've allowed them too much power. And within that, it has created a lot of discord and a lot of disharmony. And you've only got to look at divorce rates. You've only got to look at murder statistics. You've only got to look at the desecration of morals since government has been guiding us. And we really need to look at it.
And the way we say this, like when we're like, well, the government has nothing to do with stay-at-home moms. Oh, absolutely, it does. It absolutely does.
Yes.
Because one of the things I'm studying right now, when I was telling you right before I talked about this, is like the society, the Swedish society, and how they're both equal, and how government played into this, and how everything is, it's not what you think it is. So I'm like, it's not really men and women are equal because they both work. There's a darker side that most people don't know, that I'm coming across. And I keep asking my Swedish friends, like, well, did you know about this? Did you know about that? And they're like, no. And so I went as far as asking my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, like, hey, can you tell me about you growing up when you were a child? Did your mom work? She's like, no, actually she didn't. She stayed at home. And they actually, so there was, I'm like, so when did this come in play? So that's what I'm saying. Government is messing with our families and our childhood, and our children, and breaking us apart. And I would invite everyone almost to look into that. Make your own opinions, make your own choices, and why it's this happening. How does that benefit? Because for the Swedish government, the benefit was taxes and money, because they were going down. They were strong economic, and then up until the 70s, their economy started going down because they decided to raise the taxes to 70%. So they needed both incomes now to make that money up. And so they introduced this document of the family of the future, and you guys can find it. It's a PDF that it's in the society. It's in Swedish, but you can use Google Translate. Now, with that being said, I can honestly tell you that this is not on the Swedish people, because this is nothing. Most of them don't even know or aren't even aware of this. My husband's certainly not aware of this. He was shocked to find this. And when I said that earlier, that post about the Swedish guy saying that there's something wrong with you as an adult if you don't provide. And I'm thinking of the stay-at-home moms, like, so you're saying, like, if I choose to stay at home, there's something wrong with me? That's how society, government starts putting their ideas on humans, and how this male thinks that it's okay to say there's something wrong with the person who can't provide for themselves. And just because I cannot pay or have an income, that does not make me there's something wrong with me. I chose to be with my children. I chose to do that. And the only place where I've actually felt more ashamed to be a stay-at-home mom in the whole world was Sweden. To the point where I kind of started lying. It's like, oh yeah, I'm studying. But the reality is, I can't have a job. My husband's never here. My children were still small when I moved here, and I can't just leave them. It's like, oh, leave them with that. Like, no,
you shouldn't need to have to explain yourself.
But that's how I felt.
The choices that you and your husband made for your family life. Yeah, but this is where we really need to start stamping this out and being very aware of how we've been conditioned. Like you said, you have to give an explanation. Absolutely, you do not have to give an explanation. No. What you and your husband and your family does is up to you. As long as you hurt no others, and it's not interfering with anybody else, it's got bugger all to do with anybody else. And I think
exactly
this is where we're coming unstuck. We're all interfering in each other's business rather than looking at what's actually going on within our own dynamics. And what's going on within our own dynamics is that we are being programmed. We are being messed with. Our psyches are being, it's like little fingers getting in there going, oh yeah, you think you've got that sorted? You think that's a good way of living? Right, okay, let's put this in, let's put that in, let's put the other in. So it's creating greater segregation, creating greater separation, creating greater problems on a psychological level for the whole of humanity. And when you actually do that, we then become malleable, we then become pliable, we then become puppets.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's a really good place to end this. So what we're saying, ladies, gents, parents, make your choices stand firm, take ownership of them, and don't allow anybody to plant seeds of insecurity and distaste or judgment on you.
Absolutely. Like I said, at the end of the day, these are just statistics and these are just scientific things that are showing, make your own opinion, but don't judge others and be empathetic for those that work and for those that don't, because you don't know their stories and you don't know their lives. And we need to stop, especially among women, attacking each other.
Yeah. So that's bye-bye from me.
And me. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Till next time.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so and please leave a review, as it helps us grow and bridge the gap between the sexes. If you have any topics you would like us to cover, shoot us an email. Until next time, go out and practice putting all your cards on the table with no judgment, expectations, and fear.